The 3:17 a.m. brown line doesn't give a damn if you're sleeping. It's a punctual monster, a serpent of screeching steel and shuddering timber that snakes its way through Wicker Park on elevated tracks. Tonight, like most nights, it was my alarm clock. The tremor started in the floorboards, a low hum that climbed the legs of my bed frame and vibrated straight up my spine. Then came the roar, a physical presence that rattled the single-pane window in its frame and made the half-empty bottle of bourbon on my nightstand dance. I didn't bother opening my eyes. I knew the view. The cascade of sparks from the third rail. The brief, flickering slideshow of strangers' faces staring blankly out the grimy windows. And then darkness, leaving only the fading echo of its passage. My apartment is a shoebox with a view of that monster. The rent is cheap for a reason. The walls are thin enough to hear my neighbors argue about money, and the air always carries a faint, damp chill that sinks into your bones. A grid of city maps covers most of one wall, crisscrossed with colored pins and fine point marker notations that only I can decipher. It's a relic from my old life, the one where I was Arthur Coleman, private investigator, the one before the bite. Now I'm just Arthur, and I hunt different kinds of monsters. A dull ache throbbed in my left shoulder, a familiar souvenir from the last full moon. It's a chronic condition, this lycanthropy. Like bad arthritis or a trick knee, but with more teeth and a tendency to get you shot at. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the bare wood cold against my feet. The faint green glow of my laptop on the desk across the room cut through the gloom. It wasn't a blinking cursor. It was a solid, steady light, a summons. I crossed the small room, my movement stiff. The laptop was a scarred clamshell of black plastic, its security protocols layered so deep it would take a government agency a week to crack it. For me, it was a lifeline to the only work I could get these days. I sat down, the old wooden chair creaking in protest, and tapped the spacebar. The screen lit up with a simple text-only interface. No greeting, no pleasantries. Just the cold, hard geometry of a job sent from a secure server I knew only as the broker. Contract active, 734 target, Julian Price. Class, vampiric, lineage unknown, estimated, 70 to 90 years post-mortem. Location, last confirmed activity in Lincoln Park, vicinity of the North Pond Nature Sanctuary. Violation, Protocol Section 4, Paragraph B. Open feeding on human populace, resulting in fatality. Aggravating factor. Target is believed to be under the influence of a controlled thaumaturgical substance known as glimmer. Terms. Standard termination. Proof of a disposal required. Payment upon confirmation. I read the lines twice. Glimmer. That was new, but the street-level whispers had been growing louder. A designer narcotic for the undead. They take a human, pump them full of high-grade psychedelics, then drain them. The resulting blood was supposedly like mainlining God for a vampire. A roaring psychedelic high that made them sloppy, reckless, and powerful. It also made them a massive liability. The protocol was a fragile truce. A gentleman's agreement between the things that go bump in the night to keep the bumping quiet. Lest the humans with their satellites and helicopters decide to fumigate the entire city. A vampire tweaking out and leaving bodies in one of Chicago's most affluent neighborhoods was like setting off a flare in a powder keg. My job was to put out the flare. Permanently. I closed the laptop and stood up, the ache in my shoulder already receding as my body geared up for the hunt. The part of me that was still a detective ran through the logistics. The other part, the part that was a predator, was already tasting the air, sifting through the city's scents for something out of place. My gear was Spartan. I didn't need much. I pulled a well-worn leather jacket from the back of the chair. From a locked metal box under my bed, I retrieved my Sig Sauer P226. I ejected the magazine, checking the rounds by the dim streetlights filtering through the window. 10 rounds of standard hollow points. I thumbed them out, replacing 5 with the ones I kept in a separate oilcloth pouch. They had a dull, milky sheen. Silver. Not enough to kill a vampire, but it would hurt like hell. Silver is anathema to most of us on this side of the veil. It burns me too. A deep soul-freezing fire that feels like having your nerves ripped out. That's why I only carried a few. They were for emergencies, or for sending a very clear message. I slid a 6-inch K-bar knife into the sheath on my belt. It was plain, sharpened steel, but my hands were strong enough to make it count. Finally, a burner phone from a drawer full of them. Untraceable, disposable. I walked to the window and looked down at the street, 4 stories below. A few cars slid by, their headlights cutting lonely paths through the dark. The wind, the ever-present Chicago hawk, whipped around the corner of the building, carrying with it the smell of damp asphalt, distant fried onions from a 24-hour diner, and the faint acrid tang of the river. I closed my eyes, pushing past the mundane smells, extending a sense that no human possessed. I was searching for the coppery spike of fresh blood and something else. The rumored signature of glimmer, a cloying chemical sweetness like burnt sugar and ozone. Nothing yet. He was too far away. But Chicago isn't that big a city when you can run at 40 miles an hour and smell a man's fear from 3 blocks away. I didn't turn on the lights as I left. There was no one to say goodbye to, nothing to come back to except the 4 walls and the next contract. I locked the door, the click of the deadbolt echoing in the empty hall. My real weapons were already humming under my skin, my heart rate beginning to slow, my senses sharpening to a razor's edge. The hunt was on. The city was my territory, and Julian Price was an invasive species. Time to do some pest control. The L train clattered south and I moved north on foot. The wind was a physical force, a bully that shoved and prodded, trying to push me back. It tore down the canyons between the brownstones of Lincoln Park, rattling street signs and chasing discarded newspapers down the gutter. For a human, it would have been a miserable, blinding night. For me, it was a carrier wave. Every gust brought a symphony of information. I walked with my head up, my gaze sweeping the streets, but my real focus was on the air. I filtered through the layers of the city's perfume, the sharp sting of diesel exhaust from a passing bus, the yeasty warmth from the back vent of a bakery, the rot of garbage in a dented metal can, the cloying sweetness of a woman's perfume as she hurried past, clutching her coat. Each was a distinct note. I was listening for one that was out of key. I cut through Oz Park, the tin statues of the Wizard of Oz characters looming like silent metallic ghosts in the dark. The wind howled through the skeletal branches of the trees. It was here, on the northern edge of the park, that I first caught it. A faint, discordant scent woven into the wind. It wasn't just blood. That was a familiar, savory aroma like raw steak. This was different. It was blood, yes, but it was tainted. Underneath the metallic tang was a sickly, synthetic sweetness like candy floss mixed with battery acid. Glimmer. The trail was fresh, hot. My walk became a ground-eating lope. My senses flared, the world sharpening into a high-definition predator's view. The muted colors of the night became more vibrant. The low hum of the city's power grid became a distinct, audible frequency. The trail grew stronger, pulling me east toward the clubs and jazz bars lining Lincoln Avenue. The sweet, corrupt smell was a beacon in the olfactory chaos. It led me away from the main drag, into a narrow brick alleyway sandwiched between a high-end cocktail lounge and a laundromat. The air in the alley was thick with it. The stench was overpowering, making the hairs on my arms stand up. It smelled of violence and chemical bliss. And there, slumped against a graffiti-covered dumpster, was the source. She couldn't have been more than 25. A DePaul University sweatshirt, designer jeans, trendy sneakers. Her head was tilted back at an unnatural angle, her throat a mangled ruin of torn flesh. Her eyes, wide and staring, reflected the single buzzing fluorescent light overhead. They were devoid of life, but held a strange residual glimmer, a faint pinprick of psychedelic color like an oil slick on water, the last vestige of the drug in her system. She was still warm. The coppery scent of her lifeblood was everywhere, painting the concrete a slick, dark crimson. But the body itself was empty, drained dry, a discarded juice box. The distant wail of a siren started, a rising cry from somewhere downtown. Someone must have seen something, or heard the scream she never got to finish. The police would be here in minutes. I didn't have time for a forensic analysis. I scanned the scene, my eyes missing nothing. The victim was here. The splatter pattern suggested a frenzied, messy feeding. Classic glimmerhead behavior. No finesse, all raw, unhinged gluttony. But something was wrong. There were scuff marks on the brick wall opposite the body, 10 feet up. A set of deep scratches in the metal lip of the dumpster, too high for a normal person to make. He had been here, but he hadn't lingered. He'd fed and fled. Up. I tilted my head back, my gaze following the imaginary trajectory. The building was 4 stories of old Chicago brick, its face scarred with a black iron fire escape. And there, on the edge of the roof, silhouetted against the bruised purple of the night sky, was a figure. It was Julian Price. I knew it instinctively. He was tall and unnaturally thin, his movements jerky and sharp. But he wasn't reveling in his kill. He wasn't savoring the high. He was pacing. He'd move 3 steps one way, then whirl around, scanning the rooftops behind him. He'd crouch, peering down into the alley, then straighten up abruptly, running a hand through his hair. His posture was all wrong for a predator basking in the afterglow. He wasn't high, he was terrified. He was being hunted, and it wasn't by me. The siren was closer now, its wail bouncing and echoing off the buildings. It was a block away, 2 at most. Julian heard it too. He froze, his head snapping in the direction of the sound. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights, a 100-year-old blood-drinking deer, but a deer nonetheless. He scrambled back from the edge of the roof, disappearing from my sight. I didn't hesitate. I backed up to the opposite wall of the alley, took a running start, and launched myself upward. My fingers found purchase on the rough brick, my boots scraping for a hold. I dug in, muscles coiling and releasing, propelling me up the wall in a fluid, inhuman scramble. It was faster than taking the fire escape. I hauled myself over the brick parapet and onto the flat, tar-papered roof, landing in a low crouch. The wind up here was a physical blow, roaring in my ears. The roof was a maze of ventilation units, skylights and pipes. The chemical sweet scent of glimmer was strong on Julian's trail, but underneath it, I could smell his fear. It was a sharp, acrid scent, like burnt wiring. He was running, his footsteps surprisingly heavy for a vampire, pounding across the rooftops to the north. This wasn't a simple termination anymore. My contract was to eliminate a liability who was high on psycho-magic blood. But the target wasn't high. He was running for his life. And whatever he was running from had him scared enough to get sloppy, to break the protocol, to draw the kind of attention that could get us all killed. My simple pest control job had just gotten complicated, and much, much more interesting. The chase was a blur of brick, steel, and a sky the color of a day-old bruise. We were phantoms moving across the city's sleeping spine. Julian was fast, his vampiric speed augmented by sheer panic. He leapt across alleys that would have been suicide jumps for a human, his long coat flaring out behind him like broken wings. But I was built for this. My body moved with an efficiency that was more animal than man. I didn't think. I reacted. My legs pumped, eating up the distance. The wind whipped past my face, carrying his scent, that cocktail of old dust, glimmer, and raw terror. He was heading downtown, diving deeper into the concrete heart of the city. A foolish move. Open spaces were his friend. The dense urban landscape was my hunting ground. He scrambled down a fire escape near the Chicago Theater, the metal groaning under his weight. I didn't bother with the stairs. I leaped from the roof, dropping 2 stories and catching the railing of the fire escape below me. The impact jarred my bones, a shockwave of force that would have shattered a human's arms. I barely felt it. I was 2 levels below him in a second. He glanced down, his eyes wide with a fresh spike of fear, and pushed himself harder. He hit the pavement and sprinted toward the entrance to Lower Wacker Drive. A smart rat, heading for the sewer. Lower Wacker is Chicago's basement, a multi-level labyrinth of concrete tunnels, forgotten service roads, and steam-filled darkness that runs beneath the polished facade of the Loop. It's a place where sunlight never reaches, a perfect hiding spot for things that don't like the day. I followed him in, the sounds of the city above muting instantly, replaced by the drip, drip, drip of water seeping through 1,000 cracks in the concrete and the low hum of ancient electrical conduits. The air was cool and thick with the smell of damp earth, car exhaust, and decay. He was faster in the straightaways, but I was better in the maze. I could hear his panicked breathing echoing off the walls, could smell the path he took through the intersecting tunnels. I cut him off at an access ramp leading down to a long-abandoned subterranean metro station. The platform was dark, littered with decades of debris. The tracks were rusted red, disappearing into an inky black tunnel at one end. It was a dead end. He skidded to a halt, whirling around to face me. He was cornered. I slowed to a walk, letting the echo of my footsteps announce my arrival. I kept my hands open, away from my weapons. This was the part of the job I hated and excelled at in equal measure. The conversation before the end. "Julian Price," I said. My voice was calm, conversational, but it carried in the cavernous space. He didn't take a defensive stance. His shoulders slumped. His face, pale and aristocratic even under a layer of grime, was a mask of utter desperation. The glimmer was wearing off, leaving his eyes wide and haunted. "You're one of the brokers," he rasped, his voice thin and dry. "A dog on a leash. Come to put me down for Lincoln Park." "The girl drew a lot of attention, Julian. You know the rules. The protocol keeps us all safe." A harsh, broken laugh escaped his lips. "Safe? There is no safe, not anymore." He took a staggering step forward, his hands raised in a gesture of supplication, not aggression. "Please, you have to listen. I didn't mean to kill her. I was trying to hide." "Hide?" I took a step closer, my senses on high alert. "You hide by draining a co-ed in a public alley? That's not hiding. That's screaming for attention. I needed the glimmer, he hissed, his voice cracking. I thought it would mask my scent, that the noise in my head would drown me out, so it couldn't find me. His eyes darted around the dark station, as if expecting something to lunge from the shadows. But it didn't work. It found me anyway. It's still out there. It's hunting me. I stopped. This wasn't the usual plea of a cornered mark. This was genuine, primal fear. What's hunting you, Julian? He shook his head, a frantic, jerky motion. I don't know what it is. It came for me 2 nights ago, tried to copy me. I felt it in my mind, a mirror, looking at me, learning me. I fought it off, but it got a piece. I've been running ever since. The story sounded like drug-fueled paranoia, but his terror felt real. A mirror? What are you talking about? It doesn't have its own face, he screamed, the words echoing off the damp concrete. His eyes were wild. It's just a mirror that eats. It shows you yourself, and then there's nothing left but it. Before I could press him for more, his body went rigid. A violent tremor shot through him. He let out a choked gasp and clawed at his own chest, his fine-boned fingers digging into his shirt. No, it's here, he whimpered, his eyes rolling back in his head. Then I saw it. His skin, a pale, almost translucent white, began to ripple. It wasn't a muscle spasm. It was something deeper. Waves of motion flowed under his flesh, starting at his chest and spreading out to his limbs, as if a nest of snakes were writhing just beneath the surface. His features began to blur, his nose and cheekbones seeming to soften and lose their definition, like a wax sculpture left too close to a fire. He let out a final, agonizing scream, a sound that was both a plea for help and a shriek of oblivion. My hand went to the gun on my hip. The broker's contract was for a termination. It didn't specify the circumstances. This was something new, something monstrous and wrong. Julian was dying or being unmade from the inside out. Whatever that thing was, it hadn't just gotten a piece of him. It had planted a seed, a virus. There was no saving him. There was only mercy, and fulfilling my contract. I drew the SIG, the motion fluid, and practiced. He was still convulsing on the ground, his body twisting into an unrecognizable shape. I'm sorry, I said, though I wasn't sure if he could hear me. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. The silver bullet did its work. The rippling stopped. The body went still. Silence descended, thick and heavy. The only sound was the steady drip of water somewhere in the darkness. I stood over what was left of Julian Price, the smell of gunpowder sharp in the air. The contract was complete, but a cold knot of dread was tightening in my gut. Julian wasn't the problem. He was just a symptom, and his last words echoed in the suffocating quiet of the Chicago underworld. It doesn't have its own face. It's just a mirror that eats. The Cook County morgue is a cold, sterile place, even for the living. For someone who can smell the chemical decay and lingering fear on every refrigerated drawer, it's a cathedral of endings. I used the service entrance, a heavy steel door that opened into a loading bay, reeking of disinfectant and something older, something that no amount of bleach could ever scrub away. The bay was empty except for a single gurney. I unzipped the black body bag I'd carried over my shoulder, a grim 200-pound duffel, and rolled Julian's body onto the cold metal slab. I pushed it through the double doors into the autopsy theater. The room was a symphony in stainless steel and white tile, bathed in the unforgiving glare of overhead fluorescent lights. And waiting for me, meticulously arranging a set of scalpels on a tray, was Dr. Gideon Marlowe. Marlowe was the night shift chief medical examiner, but that was just his day job. Or night job, rather. He was also a ghoul, a creature that straddles the line between the living and the dead. He didn't need to eat human flesh, not like the feral kind you hear about in stories, but he drew a certain sustenance from being near it. It kept him from falling apart. It also made him unnervingly good at his job. He had the placid, patient demeanor of a funeral director and a complexion the color of old parchment. His fingers, I noted as he picked up a bone saw, seemed even longer and more delicate than I remembered. "Arthur," he said, his voice a dry, academic whisper. He didn't look up from his tools. "You're late. And you smell of cordite and desperation." "Had to take the scenic route," I grunted, pushing the gurney next to his table. "His name is Julian Price. Vampire. Contract was for a protocol violation. Glimmer." Marlowe finally looked up, his pale gray eyes fixing on the body. He circled the gurney like a shark, his gaze analytical, predatory. "Glimmer. How vulgar. The new generation has no appreciation for subtlety." He peeled back the sheet covering Julian's face. "But this is not the work of a silver bullet, is it? The entry wound is clean, but the tissue damage around it, it's necrotic. And the subject's facial structure appears lax." "He was coming apart before I shot him," I said, leaning against a steel counter. "Something was happening to him from the inside. He said he was being hunted by something that tried to copy him." Marlowe raised a thin eyebrow, a flicker of genuine interest in his otherwise placid face. "Copy him? Fascinating." He set to work. I've seen dozens of autopsies, but watching Marlowe was like watching a master craftsman. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. His long fingers moved with a surgeon's precision, cutting, probing, examining. For 20 minutes, the only sounds were the slick parting of flesh, the soft click of metal tools on a tray, and Marlowe's occasional quiet hum of concentration. Then he stopped. He was holding a sample of tissue from Julian's heart under a high-powered microscope connected to a monitor on the wall. The image displayed was a mess. "Extraordinary," Marlowe breathed, leaning closer to the screen. "What is it?" "Look." He pointed a long gray finger at the monitor. "These are his cells, or what's left of them. There's widespread lysing. The cell walls are simply dissolving. But it's not random, like a chemical agent would cause. It's patterned. The mitochondrial DNA is frayed, indistinct. It looks like a photograph that has been copied too many times, degraded, faded." He typed a few commands on a keyboard, pulling up another set of images. "This is a sample from a normal vampiric subject. See the cellular structure? Resilient, tightly bound, predatory. Julian's, by comparison, looks like a cheap knockoff." He turned away from the microscope, his pale eyes locking onto mine. The professional curiosity was gone, replaced by something more sober, more concerned. "Your vampire wasn't lying, Arthur. He wasn't just paranoid. Something was actively erasing him on a fundamental biological level. It's as if someone made a poor Xerox of his soul, and the original document simply began to crumble into dust. The image was chillingly perfect, a mirror that eats. I pushed myself off the counter. So what was it? What could do this? "I have no precedent for this," Marlowe admitted, stripping off his latex gloves. "No disease, no magical attack I've ever encountered leaves a signature like this. It's not destroying the cells, it's unwriting them." He paused, wiping his hands on a clean towel. "However, this cellular degradation does feel vaguely familiar. He walked over to a refrigerated storage unit and typed in a code. A drawer slid open with a soft hiss. In the last month, I've handled 3 other unusual cases. Officially, they were suicides. High flyers who jumped from their penthouses or took a long walk into Lake Michigan. Humans? No. He pulled out 3 evidence bags, each containing a small plastic vial of preserved tissue. All of them were established members of the supernatural community. Old money, powerful players. And all of them, he said, tapping one of the vials, were connected to the Venturi clan. My gut tightened. The Venturi were the oldest, most powerful vampire clan in Chicago. Blue Bloods, corporate raiders and political puppet masters who looked down on street-level thugs like Julian Price. They were the very definition of protocol adherence. And the familiar part? I asked, my voice low. Marlowe held one of the vials up to the light. All 3 of them exhibited a similar, though much less advanced, state of cellular decay. I logged it as an anomaly at the time, a potential genetic blight within their lineage. But now... He placed the vial back on the tray with Julian's sample. Now I believe I was looking at the early stages of the same disease that consumed Mr. Price. I had my next lead. Julian wasn't the target. He was collateral damage. The real targets were the city's elite. And whatever this thing was, it was climbing the food chain. The Venturi won't talk to me, I said. They see me as the help, at best. A janitor. Then you'll have to find another way in, Marlowe said, already turning back to his work. But I would be careful, Arthur. Whatever is hunting the monsters is a monster of a different order entirely. And it seems to have developed a taste for the local vintage. The Venturi clan was a closed book, a fortress of old money and older secrets. Walking up to their front door wasn't an option. I needed a ghost key, a way to peek inside their digital lives without them ever knowing I was there. For that, I had only one contact. The problem was, he was an actual ghost. I drove my beat-up Ford sedan to a place where the city's nervous system was exposed. A parking garage under the tangle of highways near the loop known as the Spaghetti Bowl. Down here, thick bundles of fiber-optic cables ran like arteries along the concrete ceiling, and the air hummed with the flow of 1 billion bits of information. This was his turf. I killed the engine and the headlights, plunging the car into near-total darkness, broken only by the distant orange glow of a sodium vapor lamp. I turned the key to accessory, powering up the car's electronics, and tuned the old analog radio dial, sliding it slowly across the FM band. "Glitch?" I said into the quiet. "You there? It's Coleman. I need a favor." For a moment, nothing. Just the hiss of static. Then, the static sharpened, coalescing into a rhythmic pattern, like digital Morse code. The dome light in the car flickered in time with it. Coleman always in the dark. Bad for your eyes. The voice wasn't spoken. It was synthesized, pieced together from 100 different radio sound bites. A DJ's hype, a snippet of a commercial, a talk show host's laugh. It crackled through the speakers, distorted and ethereal. "Can't afford the electric bill," I said dryly. "Listen, I need some information." Glitch was a hacker back in the late 90s. One of the best. The story goes he tried to hack the wrong corporate server and they fried his rig, with him still jacked into it. His consciousness, or whatever was left of it, got uploaded, shattered, and scattered across Chicago's burgeoning digital infrastructure. Now he was a ghost in the machine, a sentient piece of code that lived in the city's data streams. He was a pain in the ass to talk to, but his reach was unparalleled. Information is my currency. What are we buying today? The GPS screen on my dashboard flickered to life, displaying the words in stark green text. 3 names. Venturi clan members. All ruled suicides in the last month. And a low-level vamp named Julian Price. Died tonight. I need to know what they all have in common. The radio hissed. The dome light pulsed erratically. Outside, a nearby streetlight began to flicker, its on-off rhythm matching the static. Glitch was thinking, his consciousness racing through city records, encrypted servers, and private networks at the speed of light. Busy month for the leeches. The radio crackled. A new line of text appeared on the GPS. Processing. Venturi are clean. Tidy digital footprints like ghosts. They're not ghosts, I said. They're just rich. Dig deeper. Emails, phone records, credit card statements, anything. The static intensified. The car's dashboard lights flickered wildly. A snippet of a smooth jazz song played for a second, then was cut off by a burst of static. Glitch was working, pulling on threads I couldn't even see. I sat in the vibrating silence, waiting. It was always unnerving, talking to him. It felt like trying to have a conversation with a thunderstorm. After a full minute, the chaos subsided. The GPS screen blinked, and a new set of data appeared. Pattern detected, cross-referencing financial data and location pings. A map of downtown Chicago appeared on the screen. 4 separate locations lit up, the last known whereabouts of the 3 Venturi vamps and Julian Price before they went off-grid. All 4 subjects show a deviation in routine in the weeks prior to termination. Increased paranoia. Digital communication ceases. They become ghosts. The radio voice was spliced from a documentary narrator. But before they disappear, they all go to the same place. A single point on the map began to pulse, a red beacon in the heart of the Gold Coast, near the top of one of the city's most iconic skyscrapers. Sanctum, an exclusive invitation-only club. Very private, very expensive. Sanctum, I murmured, reading the name. Run by the Venturi for the Venturi. And friends, the GPS added. Membership is diverse. Werewolf's not on the list. A smiley face emoticon, a simple colon and parenthesis appeared on the screen. It was Glitch's idea of a joke. I need to know what's going on inside that club. The radio static returned, softer this time. A woman's voice from a late-night call-in show whispered, "Some doors are best left unopened, Arthur." "This door is already open," I said. And something came out. Something that's eating this city's monsters from the inside out. I need to know what it is. The flickering intensified. The car's locks clicked open and shut, a frantic metallic rhythm. Glitch was agitated. The club's network is an old-world fortress, a black iron wall. No wireless, all hard-lined and shielded. I can't get in. The voice was strained, but I can see the guest list. Digital invitations. One was just sent out, to a human consultant, an art appraiser, scheduled to meet with a clan member tomorrow night. The screen displayed a name, Dr. Basil Wentworth, and a photo of a fussy-looking man in his late 50s with a bow tie. He looks about your size, the GPS screen noted. A plan, reckless and stupid, began to form in my mind. It was the kind of plan you make when you have no other options. "Glitch, I need you to delay him." A canceled flight. A sudden case of food poisoning. A massive traffic jam on Lakeshore Drive. Whatever it takes, I need his invitation. The radio was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the hum of the transformer on a nearby pole. Then, a final crackled message came through the speakers, pieced together from a movie trailer. "Your funeral." The GPS screen went blank. The dome light went out. The radio returned to simple, empty static. The ghost was gone. I started the car, the engine turning over with a reassuring roar. I had a name, a place, and a way in. Tomorrow night I was going to crash the city's most exclusive party. Tomorrow night I was walking into the snake pit. The John Hancock Center stabs 1,000 feet into the Chicago sky, a monument of black steel and dark glass. The sanctum occupied the entire 94th floor, a space that was once a public observatory, now converted into a private haven for the city's shadow cabinet. Getting in as Arthur Coleman was impossible. Getting in as Dr. Basil Wentworth, a fussy art appraiser with a bad toupee and a forged ID, was merely difficult. Glitch had done his part. Dr. Wentworth was currently enjoying an unexpected and violent bout of food poisoning at a hotel near O'Hare, courtesy of a hacked delivery service order. I had his digital invitation on a burner phone and a suit that was a little too tight in the shoulders. I felt like a fraud, which I suppose was the point. The private elevator whisked me upward in unnerving silence. My ears popped twice. My senses, already on high alert, were screaming. The air in the elevator car was sterile, but I could smell the faintest trace of something ancient and predatory on the brushed steel walls. The scent of old blood and cold stone, the scent of vampires. The doors opened not into a lobby, but directly into the club itself. The view was the first thing that hit you. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire space, offering a breathtaking, godlike panorama of Chicago. The city lights spread out below like a carpet of fallen stars, stretching all the way to the black, endless expanse of Lake Michigan. The club was the epitome of cold, minimalist luxury. Black marble floors, chrome fixtures, furniture that looked more like sculpture than something you'd actually sit on. The patrons were scattered throughout the vast space, conversing in low tones. They were beautiful, impeccably dressed, and radiated an aura of power that had nothing to do with money. I saw vampires with skin like polished ivory, a trio of fae whose eyes seemed to shift color in the low light, and even a sorcerer I recognized from a broker file, surrounded by a subtle, shimmering ward. This was the 1% of the 1% of the supernatural world. I kept my head down, playing the part of the nervous human, and made my way to the bar. I needed to find my contact, a Venturi elder named Lucien, who supposedly wanted to appraise a medieval tapestry. More importantly, I needed to observe. I was in the heart of the beast's new hunting ground. I ordered a club soda I had no intention of drinking and scanned the room. My focus wasn't on the faces, but on the undercurrents. I was looking for anything out of place, any sign of the paranoia Glitch had mentioned, and I found it. It wasn't overt, but it was there. The conversations were a little too quiet. The members kept a little too much distance from each other. There were furtive, sideways glances. The atmosphere wasn't one of relaxed opulence. It was one of tense, quiet suspicion. They knew something was wrong. They just didn't know what. Then I saw her. Standing near the center of the room, framed by the spectacular view, was Genevieve Dumont. Even if I hadn't known who she was, I would have felt her presence. She was the matriarch of the Venturi clan, a vampire of terrifying age and power. She was flawless, a raven-haired statue in a blood-red dress, a glass of dark liquid held in one perfect white hand. All eyes were on her, but no one was approaching her. She was the queen, and her court was keeping its distance. I watched her, my enhanced senses straining, and the first discordant note struck me. She was talking to a younger vampire, a man I recognized as a rival from another lesser clan. Her posture was open, friendly. I'd read the files on Genevieve. She was known for her icy disdain for upstarts. Friendly was not in her vocabulary. Then a second note, louder this time. She laughed at something he said. It was a clear, musical sound, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were cold, flat, and empty. I closed my eyes for a second, tuning out the sight and sound, focusing solely on my sense of smell. I pushed past the expensive perfumes, the scent of old paper from the books lining one wall, the ozone from the electronics. I searched for her scent, the unique signature of a powerful, ancient vampire. It was there, but it was faint, like a perfume that had been sprayed on a mannequin. It was a mask, and underneath it was the smell I'd been subconsciously dreading. It was the same wrongness I had felt in the tunnel with Julian, but magnified 1,000 times. It was the smell of a void, a vacuum where a soul should be, the scent of a perfect hollow copy. My blood ran cold. The creature wasn't just targeting the Venturi. It had already taken the queen. The mirror that eats had consumed Genevieve Dumont and was now wearing her skin, standing in the heart of her power, surrounded by her enemies and her allies, and none of them had a clue. Julian wasn't a target of opportunity. He was a loose end. He must have encountered the creature when it was making its move on the Venturi, and it had been hunting him ever since to silence him. My contract had just escalated from pest control to regicide. The man I was supposed to be meeting, Lucian, approached the bar. He had the same pale, predatory grace as the others, his eyes ancient and knowing. "Dr. Wentworth?" he asked, his voice smooth as velvet. I turned, forcing a nervous smile. "Yes, Lucian, I presume? A pleasure." But my eyes weren't on him. They were on Genevieve. She had turned her head slightly, and for a fraction of a second her empty gaze met mine across the room. There was no recognition, no suspicion. There was nothing. It was like looking into the lens of a camera, a cold, unblinking instrument of observation. And in that moment I knew. It saw me. Not as Arthur Coleman, the werewolf. Not as Dr. Wentworth, the art appraiser. It saw me as a piece on the board that was out of place, a detail that didn't fit the picture it was creating. The skin on the back of my neck prickled. The hunter had just realized he was trapped in the monster's den, and the monster was looking right at him. The feeling of being watched was a physical weight. The thing wearing Genevieve's face didn't stare, it didn't track me. It just knew where I was. A cold, constant awareness that made every nerve in my body scream, "Run!" But running wasn't an option. Not yet. I had to be sure. I had to provoke it, to force its hand. I excused myself from a conversation with Lucian about 14th century Flemish weaving techniques, my mind racing. I needed a lure, a piece of bait only the real Genevieve Dumont, or something pretending to be her with an imperfect memory, would bite on. The broker's files were my only asset. I remembered a small, heavily encrypted addendum to her profile, a political misstep from the 1920s, a failed alliance with a rival in St. Louis that resulted in a public humiliation she had spent a century burying. It was a deep, personal wound. No one dared speak of it. I found a secluded alcove overlooking the lake and pulled out the burner phone. I composed a simple, anonymous text and sent it to Genevieve's personal number, which I'd also memorized from the file. I know what happened in St. Louis, the full story. If you want the evidence to disappear, meet me. Level P4, southeast corner of the parking garage, alone. I hit send. It was a gamble. If this thing had perfect access to her memories, it would know it was a trap. If it was just a good copy, a mimic, then its knowledge might be superficial. Greed and the instinct for self-preservation might override caution. I pocketed the phone and made my excuses to Lucien, feigning a sudden migraine. He looked annoyed, but let me go. Leaving the party was the easy part. The parking garage was a stark contrast to the opulence above. It was a concrete tomb, dimly lit and smelling of cold exhaust fumes and dampness. I found the southeast corner, a spot shielded from the security cameras by a massive support pillar. I waited in the shadows, every sense cranked to the maximum. I could hear the drip of condensation from a pipe 50 yards away, the hum of the electrical systems in the walls. I was a coiled spring. 5 minutes later, I heard the soft click of heels on concrete. A figure emerged from the stairwell door. It was Genevieve. She was alone, her red dress a slash of color in the gray gloom. She moved with the same predatory grace, her expression a perfect mask of aristocratic impatience. "You have something for me," she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was the same cultured, icy tone from the files. "The St. Louis affair," I said, stepping out from behind the pillar. I kept my distance, about 20 feet. "Messy business. It would be a shame if the details of your failure were to become common knowledge." She tilted her head, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. "You are either very brave or very stupid to try and blackmail me, little man." This was it. The moment of truth. "I'm neither," I said, my voice steady. "I just have a question for you." He was a cartographer, the one you betrayed in St. Louis. What was the name of the street he lived on? A flicker of something, not confusion, but a momentary blankness, passed through her eyes. The real Genevieve would have known. The name of her betrayer's home, the site of her greatest shame, would have been burned into her memory forever. "His name is irrelevant," she snapped, her composure slipping. "The details are meaningless." "They're not," I said softly. The street was called King's Way. A bitter irony, considering you deposed him. She went still. The smile vanished, and then her face began to change. It was the most horrifying thing I have ever witnessed. Her features didn't melt so much as they lost cohesion. Her cheekbones flattened. Her nose receded. Her eyes widened into black, empty pools. Her skin rippled, the way Julian's had. But this was controlled, purposeful. The beautiful mask of Genevieve Dumont dissolved, flowing away like ink in water. What was left had no definite shape. It was a humanoid silhouette made of a shimmering, semi-liquid substance the color of mercury. It had no face, no features, just a smooth, reflective surface that mirrored the dim lights of the garage. Julian was right. It was a mirror that ate. Then it attacked. It didn't run. It flowed. The thing launched itself across the concrete, closing the 20-foot distance in the blink of an eye. I barely had time to move, diving to the side as a limb, a glistening silver pseudopod, lashed out, striking the pillar where my head had been. Concrete exploded inwards, pulverized into dust. I scrambled back. Pulling the SIG, I fired twice. The bullets hit its torso with wet, slapping sounds, and were simply absorbed. It didn't even slow down. It lunged again, and as it did, its form shifted. For a terrifying second, it wore the face of Dr. Marlowe, his expression one of clinical disappointment. "You should have stayed away, Arthur." The momentary hesitation almost cost me my life. I shook my head, clearing the image, and threw myself into a roll as it swiped again. It was using my own mind against me, plucking images from my memories. It reformed, this time taking the shape of glitch, a flickering, staticky projection of light and code. Game over. It crackled in that same synthesized voice. "You're not them!" I roared, grabbing the K-bar from my belt. The gun was useless. I charged, not at the thing itself, but past it, forcing it to turn. It was impossibly fast, but its movements were fluid, not jointed. I had an advantage in raw, angular power. As it turned, I drove the knife into its side. There was no resistance, like plunging a blade into thick oil. But then, it did something I didn't expect. Its form flickered again, and for one heart-stopping moment, it was me. It was my own face staring back, contorted in a silent scream. My own memories flooded my mind. The pain of my first transformation, the taste of blood, the loneliness of my Wicker Park apartment. It was trying to paralyze me with my own past. I roared, a sound that was half man, half beast, and ripped the knife free. The creature recoiled, letting out a soundless, psychic scream that vibrated in my teeth. Where the steel had been, its silvery skin boiled and smoked. Plain steel. It wasn't magic, it was something else, biology. Alien. It saw it couldn't win. Not here, not now. Its form collapsed, flattening into a silver puddle on the ground. It flowed with impossible speed toward a storm drain in the center of the garage. Before I could react, it poured itself through the iron grate and was gone, vanishing into the city's labyrinthine sewer system. I was left panting in the echoing silence of the garage. On the oil-stained concrete where it had disappeared, a single, tiny bead of the silvery, amorphous substance lay shimmering under the dim light. My only proof. The dance was over. I had wounded it. I had made it reveal itself. And in doing so, I had just declared war on a thing I didn't understand, and unwittingly signed my own death warrant. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of streetlights and rising dread. I had the sample, the small, silvery globule now sealed in a glass vial from my emergency kit, but I had no victory. I hadn't killed the faceless one, I'd just pissed it off. And I'd done it while wearing the face of a man who was supposed to be a guest of the Venturi clan. When I walked through my door, the green light on my laptop was blinking. Not the steady glow of a new contract, but a frantic, insistent pulse. A warning. I sat down and opened the machine. The broker's interface was on the screen, but it was different. It was a single stark message, flagged with the highest priority code. Protocol alert. Severance subject, Arthur Coleman. Violation. Protocol Section 1, Paragraph A. Unsanctioned hostile action against a recognized clan head, Genevieve Dumont, Venturi. Action interpreted as an attempted assassination and catalyst for open factional warfare. Ruling. Subject is declared hostis, enemy of the protocol. All assets frozen. All standing contracts voided. Then came the final soul-crushing part, a new contract page loaded onto the screen. It looked like any other, except for one detail. Contract active. 735 target. Arthur Coleman. Location. Last confirmed activity in Wicker Park. Terms. Termination. Open bounty. All factions authorized to engage. My own face, a grainy image from a 5-year-old PI license, stared back at me from the screen. My blood turned to ice. They thought I had attacked Genevieve. The faceless one had played its hand perfectly. It attacked me in the garage, then fled. The real Genevieve, who must have been held captive somewhere by the creature, was probably found or escaped right after I left the building. She would have no memory of the encounter. Only that she was supposed to meet a human appraiser who then disappeared. The Venturi would find evidence of a struggle, maybe even a scent of werewolf, and put 2 and 2 together. The conclusion. A rogue lycanthrope, working for some unknown power, had tried to assassinate their matriarch. The broker, The cold, impartial system designed to maintain the peace had just painted a giant target on my back. My life as I knew it was over. My burner phone rang. I almost didn't answer it, but the number was Marlowe's secure line. "Don't talk," he said, his voice a rushed, urgent whisper. There was noise in the background, shouting, the sound of heavy objects being moved. "My lab is being searched. The Venturi. They're claiming jurisdiction over Price's body. They know you brought him to me. They know we spoke." "Marlowe, listen to me. Genevieve is a fake," I started. "It doesn't matter what's real, Arthur. It only matters what they believe." He hissed. "My access is being revoked. My neutrality is compromised. Do not come here. Do not contact me. You are on your own." The line went dead. I was reaching for my laptop to try and contact Glitch when the screen itself flickered. Text appeared, stark and chaotic against the black background, bypassing the broker's interface entirely. "They're watching. Network-wide trace on your digital signature. They're coming for you, Coleman. They're everywhere. Get out. Get dark. Run." The message dissolved into a shower of static, and the laptop screen went black. Glitch was cutting me off to protect himself. I was an island. My bank accounts, tied to the broker's payment system, would be empty. My informants were gone. Every vampire, ghoul, sorcerer, and bounty hunter in the city who wanted to make a name for themselves or curry favor with the Venturi would be gunning for me. The rumble of the next L train shook the apartment, but this time it wasn't a familiar annoyance. It was the sound of an approaching army. I looked around my small apartment, the maps on the wall, the empty bourbon bottle, the cold bed. It was never a home, but it was my den, my territory. Now it was a cage. I grabbed my jacket, the SIG, the knife, and the vial with the silver substance. That was all I had left. My entire life reduced to what I could carry. I went to the window, peering down at the street. A long black sedan without license plates was parked across the street. Two figures stood in the shadows of an alleyway, their stillness unnatural. They were already here. They expected me to use the door. Or maybe the fire escape. They were thinking like hunters cornering a man. I wasn't a man anymore. Not entirely. I took a deep breath, smashed the window with my elbow, and jumped. The 4-story drop would have crippled me a few years ago. Now, I hit the pavement below in a crouched, jarring roll, the impact shuddering up my legs. I was up in a second, sprinting, not away from the watchers, but towards the elevated tracks. I scrambled up a support pillar, the rough iron digging into my hands, and hauled myself onto the wooden railway ties just as another train came roaring out of the darkness. I ran along the narrow service path, the train thundering beside me, its noise and lights providing the perfect cover. I was a ghost in my own city. The infrastructure I knew like the back of my hand was now a hostile landscape. Every shadow could hold an enemy. Every friendly face was now a potential betrayer. I was alone, hunted, and running out of time. The faceless one hadn't just taken a vampire's life, it had taken mine. And the only way to get it back was to do the one thing no one expected: find allies among my enemies. There's a rule among lone wolves like me: never run to another pack. A lone wolf is an anomaly, a threat to the established order. You don't get welcomed with open arms, you get your throat torn out for trespassing. But I was out of options. The Venturi and their allies owned the night in the city's center. My only hope was to go where they wouldn't follow, to a place where their power was meaningless. I had to go south. The south side of Chicago is pack territory. Specifically the territory of the Crescent Moon Pack, run by an alpha named Maya Washington. We had a history, Maya and I, not a good one. I saw her pack as a crutch, a throwback to archaic rules and dominance games. She saw me as a deserter, a wolf who denied his own nature. We respected each other's strength, but that was as far as it went. I found their den in the skeletal remains of an old steel mill near the Calumet River. The place was a rust-colored graveyard of industry, all silent smokestacks and cavernous, echoing warehouses. The air smelled of decay, cold metal, and a scent I knew intimately, the musky, earthy smell of other werewolves. They knew I was coming long before I saw them. As I stepped into the main foundry, a vast, cathedral-like space where moonlight streamed through shattered skylights, two of her sentinels emerged from the shadows. They were both in their human forms, but their posture was all wolf. Low, poised, ready to spring. "Washington," I said, my voice echoing in the huge space. I didn't raise it. I knew she could hear me. "I need to talk." "You've got a lot of nerve showing your face here, Coleman," a voice called down from a catwalk high above. Maya Washington dropped to the foundry floor as lightly as a cat, landing without a sound. She was tall, athletic, with short-cropped hair and eyes that missed nothing. She radiated an aura of absolute authority. "The bounty on your head is the talk of the town. My pack could retire on what the Venturi are offering for your hide, and start a war in the process." I shot back, holding my ground, "Which is what this is all about." She took a slow circle around me, her eyes sizing me up. Her pack members watched from the shadows, a dozen pairs of eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "You look like hell. I hear you tried to take out Genevieve Dumont." "I was set up," I said, reaching slowly into my jacket pocket. Her sentinels tensed, muscles coiling. I ignored them, pulling out the small glass vial. "The thing that's hunting the Venturi isn't a werewolf. It's not anything I've ever seen. Genevieve, the thing I fought, it wasn't her. It was a copy." I tossed the vial to her. She caught it deftly. She uncorked it, sniffing the contents cautiously. Her expression, usually a controlled mask of command, shifted. A flicker of confusion, of revulsion, crossed her face. "What is this?" she asked, her voice low. The smell was alien to her, too. It wasn't vampire, or fae, or human. It was just other. "It's a piece of the thing that's wearing her face," I explained, my words coming out in a rush. "It's a shapeshifter, but not like us. It copies people, perfect duplicates. Then the original starts to decay, fall apart on a cellular level. I have a contact at the morgue who confirmed it. It's been picking off high-level Venturi for a month, and now it's taken the Queen. It framed me for the attack to throw the city into chaos. While everyone is busy hunting me, it consolidates its power. Think about it, Maya. Who benefits from a war between the vamps and the werewolves?" She was silent, still staring at the vial. The logic was sinking in. A war would weaken both sides, leaving a power vacuum. "The creature wins," I finished. "It pits us against each other, and when the dust settles, it's the only one left standing on the throne. After it's done with the Venturi, who do you think it will come for next? A pack of wolves who refuse to bow to a new vampire king would be a serious loose end." One of her lieutenants, a burly man with a scarred face, stepped forward. "He could be lying, Maya. It could be a trick." "Does it smell like a trick?" Maya retorted, not taking her eyes off me. She corked the vial and tossed it back. "He's right about one thing. The Venturi have been rattling their sabers for weeks. They're paranoid. This business with Genevieve has pushed them over the edge. An all-out war, we'd win, but the cost would be too high. The protocol would be shattered. The humans would notice. She finally looked me straight in the eye. The moment stretched, thick with a decade of animosity and mistrust. My life, and possibly the future of the entire city, hung on her decision. I was asking her to trust a lone wolf, an outcast, over the word of the most powerful vampire clan in Chicago. "You're a pariah, Coleman," she said slowly. "Hiding you puts my entire pack at risk. If the Venturi find out you're here, they'll see it as an act of aggression. They'll see it as us choosing a side." "We need to choose a side," I said, my voice intense. "Not mine, and not theirs. We need to choose the side of survival. Help me prove what's really going on. Help me find and kill this thing. We expose the imposter, we stop the war before it starts, and the bounty on my head disappears. The protocol is restored." Maya looked from me to her pack, then back again. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the alpha weighing the survival of her family against the word of a man she despised. Finally, she gave a sharp, decisive nod. "All right, Coleman. You get your alliance." Her voice was hard as steel. "We'll help you hunt your ghost. But you do things my way. No more lone wolf crap. You run with the pack now. And the second this is over, you disappear. Understood?" "Understood," I said, a wave of relief so strong it almost buckled my knees, washing over me. "Good," she said, turning to her pack. "Get him some food and a place to lie down. He's no good to us exhausted." Then she looked back at me, a dangerous glint in her eye. "Because tomorrow we go to war, not with the vampires, but with the thing that pretends to be them. And we are going to show it what a real monster looks like." The alliance was fragile, built on the shared threat of annihilation. Maya's pack gave me shelter and muscle. I gave them direction. But we were still missing the final piece of the puzzle. Where was the Faceless One's real target? Replacing Genevieve was a coup, but it wasn't the end game. To truly control the city's underworld, it needed to control the flow of information, the system of laws that governed us all. It needed to take out the broker. Getting a message to Glitch was a risk, but one we had to take. Maya had a tech-savvy pack member, a young wolf who could build a heavily shielded, untraceable terminal deep within the steel mill's guts. From there, I sent a single encrypted burst of data. The vile analysis Marlowe had given me, my account of the fight, and one question. Who is the broker? The answer came back hours later, not as text, but as a cascade of images flickering on our screen. Old legal documents, property deeds dating back to the 1890s, blueprints for the city's original telegraph network. It was a history lesson. The broker wasn't a system. It was a title, a legacy. The current broker was a man named Richard Sterling, a human lawyer from a family that had secretly arbitrated the protocol for 5 generations. He was the linchpin. And according to the last piece of data Glitch sent, a real-time feed from the city's transit authority, Richard Sterling was currently on a metro train, scheduled to arrive at Union Station in 20 minutes. It was the perfect hunting ground for the Faceless One, a place of transit, crowded, chaotic, anonymous. "It's going to make its move there," I said to Maya as we stood over the glowing screen. "It will try to copy him, replace him, and seize control of the entire protocol network." "Then we don't let it," Maya said, her eyes hard. Her top 3 hunters stood behind her, ready. "We end this now. Union Station's Great Hall is a breathtaking, cavernous space. Sunlight streamed through the massive arched windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. But we weren't looking up. We were scanning the river of humanity flowing across the marble floor. Thousands of people, commuters, tourists, families, rushing to and fro. The faceless one could be any one of them. Maya's wolves spread out, their heightened senses on a knife's edge. But they were looking for a scent they'd never smelled. I was the only one who knew what to track. I closed my eyes, tuning out the cacophony of train whistles, announcements, and echoing footsteps. I focused on the smell. Underneath the layers of perfume, popcorn, and city grime, I searched for that one unique scent, the smell of absolute soulless nothingness. There. A faint trail coming from the direction of the arrivals platform for track 7. "He's here," I growled to Maya over the small radio she'd given me. Near the west platforms, moving toward the main hall. We began to move, converging on the location. It was like trying to run through molasses. The crowd was a living, breathing obstacle. I pushed past a businessman on his phone, sidestepped a family with a crying child. The scent was getting stronger. Then I saw him. An older man in a tailored gray suit with a kind face and a leather briefcase. Richard Sterling, the broker. He was walking toward the main exit, oblivious. And about 10 feet behind him, weaving through the crowd, was a young woman in a courier's uniform. She walked with a strange, fluid grace, and as the wind from the doors swirled around her, I caught it. The cold, empty scent. "I have it," I hissed into the radio. "Female bike courier, blue jacket, closing on Sterling." Maya's voice crackled back. "We see her. We can't get a clean shot. Too many people." The courier was closing the distance. She was going to bump into him, make contact, and the copying process would begin. I had seconds. There was no time for subtlety. I broke into a full sprint, shoving people aside. Shouts of anger and surprise followed me, but I ignored them. As I closed in, the courier turned her head. Her face, an unremarkable, anonymous face, dissolved. The mirror was back. It saw me coming. It abandoned Sterling and flowed toward me, its form shifting. It became a transit cop, hand on his holster, shouting, "Freeze! Police!" People screamed and scattered, creating a circle of empty space around us. "It's a trick!" I yelled to Maya's wolves, who were now moving in, trying to flank it. The creature lunged, no longer caring about its disguise. Its arm elongated into a silver scythe. I ducked, and the weapon whistled over my head. I needed to get close. I needed to use the knife. But it was too fast, its form too fluid. Then it made a mistake. It saw Maya, her eyes blazing with lupine fury as she broke through the terrified crowd. The creature shifted again, its form swelling, becoming a monstrous 9-foot-tall wolf, a mockery of our nature. It was trying to use our own form against us, to sow chaos. But it gave me the opening I needed. I didn't have a choice. The protocol was already broken. The masquerade was shattered. In front of hundreds of screaming witnesses and a dozen security cameras, I let go. The change was a firestorm of agony and power. My bones cracked and reformed. Muscle tore and re-knit into a new, more powerful configuration. My senses exploded. The world became a hyper-real tapestry of sight, sound, and smell. I was no longer Arthur Coleman. I was the beast. I met its charge with a roar that shook the station's vaulted ceiling. We collided with the force of a car crash. Claws of steel met flesh of mercury. It was strong, but it was a mimic. It had the shape of a wolf. But not the soul, not the centuries of instinct and rage. I was the real thing. I sank my fangs into its shoulder. It didn't bleed. The silver substance just parted, then tried to engulf my head. I tore myself free, ripping away a chunk of its mass. It howled, that silent psychic scream, and I drove my claws deep into its chest. I felt for a heart, a spine, something vital. But there was nothing. It was just mass. So I did the only thing I could. I held on, my jaws locked, my claws buried deep, and I tore. I ripped and shredded, pulling it apart piece by piece, ignoring the blows that rained down on my back. Maya and her wolves were there, a whirlwind of fur and teeth, helping me, overwhelming it. Finally, with a last, desperate heave, I ripped its head from its shoulders. The body convulsed, then dissolved, melting into a vast, shimmering puddle on the marble floor before evaporating into a foul-smelling vapor, leaving nothing behind. It was over. Silence fell, broken only by the whimpers of terrified onlookers. I stood there, panting, my half-transformed body covered in silver residue, a monster revealed in the harsh light of day. Maya and her pack, equally exposed, stood beside me. We had won. We had saved the protocol. But in doing so, we had destroyed it forever. Epilogue. The official story was a gas leak explosion, a mass hallucination. The kind of tidy, unbelievable lie that people accept because the alternative is too terrifying. The broker, Richard Sterling, made sure of it. The bounty on my head was lifted. A single encrypted message appeared on a new laptop I was given. Debt paid. A Coleman cleared. I was no longer a target, but I wasn't safe. I stood on the Kinsey Street Bridge, the cold November rain slicking the pavement. The lights of the Chicago skyline reflected off the dark, churning water of the river below. My life was my own again, but it was a life lived in the open. The city's supernatural community now knew my face, my name, my nature. The fragile anonymity I had clung to was gone. The whispers followed me everywhere. The fear in people's eyes, both human and otherwise, was a constant companion. The alliance with Maya's pack had dissolved back into a grudging, respectful distance. We were too different to run together, but we were no longer enemies. We were survivors of the same war. A train rumbled on the tracks above Wacker Drive, the sound echoing through the steel canyons of the city. For 5 years, that sound had been my alarm clock, the rhythm of my lonely life. Now, it sounded different. It no longer sounded like a monster in the dark. It sounded like a warning. The faceless one was dead, but it came from somewhere. Was it the only one? Or was it just the first? The protocol had survived, but it was wounded, bleeding. The trust between the factions was shattered. The old world of quiet, hidden monsters was gone, replaced by a new, uncertain landscape of paranoia and open secrets. I pulled up the collar of my jacket against the wind. My work was done, but the city felt more dangerous than ever. I was still a hunter, still a monster. But I was no longer in the shadows. I was just another face in the crowd, waiting for the next contract, for the next thing to crawl out of the dark. And I had a feeling I wouldn't be waiting long.